Hello, my name is Autumn Brown with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. And today, July 6, 2022, I am interviewing photographer Jamie Glisson for our Art, Activism, and Education Oral History Project. So thank you, Jamie, for taking the time to speak to us today. And let's just start by your childhood. Where were you raised and what was it like growing up?
So I was born in Houston. Do I look at you or do I look at here?
Look at me.
Okay. I was born in Houston, Texas, to my very young parents. My parents had me at 17, and my dad immediately joined the military. He joined the Navy, and for the next, until I moved out of the house, we moved all over the world. I lived in Spain. I lived in Hawaii. I lived in all the eastern coastal states. And then eventually we went back to Texas, and that is where I went to high school. And then and after high school, I graduated actually a year early. So then we moved to Hawaii from there. And, I didn't want to be with my parents anymore, even if it was in Hawaii. So I left and went back to Kingsville, Texas, which is where I went to school, Texas A&M University, Kingsville. And then I met my husband, and let's see, I moved back just before Y2K, literally like 2 days before, and I met him like 3 weeks later. And then we got married. That's kind of a fun story. So when 9/11 happened, we were already engaged to be married, but when that happened, it kind of threw whatever timeline we had into like chaos, because my husband was also in the service. And my father got a hold of me from a satellite phone while he was on a ship out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So there wasn't like another Pearl Harbor Day type situation where all the ships were there and they're like sitting ducks. Because at this point, nobody knew what was going on, where the attack had come from. They just sent everybody out, and he got a hold of me. And I was actually working for Tamuk's paper, Texas A&M University, Kingsville. I was working for their paper. I was shooting football players. I think we had just won something, or maybe we were doing a spotlight. It was literally 20 years ago. So. But my dad called me and he's like, if you're serious, this is what you guys want to do, you need to do it now. We don't know what's happening. And, Richard could be shipped out at any moment, and you'll never know what happens to him at that point if you guys don't have any like legal binding arrangements, So at that point, he was actually being quarantined on the base. So all men that weren't married and didn't have children were quarantined on Naval Air Station Kingsville on base, and they were put on security detail. And he wasn't allowed to contact me. He was staying at the base, and we could talk, and I called him, and I was like, hey, you want to get married today? And he goes, let me call you back. So he hung up, and then he called me back a few minutes later, and he's like, okay, I can be there at da-da-da-da time. And then from there, I grew up playing soccer. I played for almost 18 years. And I called my old soccer coach and a good friend of mine's father, who, in high school, you grow up and other people's parents become your parents, kind of. And they walked me, we were able to pull together a small ceremony with a handful of people, and they walked me down the aisle, one on each arm. And when they called the pastor of this Methodist church in Kingsville, he was at, it was a Saturday night. So and it's a small town, and any small town in Texas on the weekends, they're going to shut down for football. So basically everything was shut down, and this pastor was at the A&M football game. And he was leaving to come and marry us. And he saw his pianist in the stands and grabbed her and brought her down to, like, she had like pom-poms in her hair, and he had on like crazy football t-shirts and stuff. And when they got there, he pulled a green blazer out of like a donation bin that was at the church. And it was fun. But we were able to pull it together. And when we had our little ceremony and we kissed, my lips swelled up so big because Richard had been put through like a pepper spray training that day. And he was immune to it by then, but I wasn't. So it burned my mouth so bad. I just swelled up. But and then we went to El Jardín, which was our favorite restaurant in town. The best enchiladas ever. And that was that. It was a fun little whirlwind day. Started off with me taking pictures of football players, and then I got married. It was crazy. But and then that was September 15th, 2001. And then I think by February, we were moved to Virginia. We lived in Norfolk, Virginia for a couple years, and it was still a rough time for our country, I guess you could say, just at least on the military side. He was shipped overseas and was gone a lot. And I was by myself. And I actually started kind of painting then. I mean, they were no good. I remember one time I gifted a friend like a stack of paintings, and she was all, thanks. It's like, yeah, I'm a painter now. So, oh, it was good times. But let's see. So we were in Virginia, and then we moved from there. Richard decided he did not want to be a lifer in the military at that point. So he did his 6 years in the service and got out, and we moved to Texas. And we lived in Houston. My dad was just retiring. He was in for 26 years. And he got out, and then we were all just most of my family was there. So we lived there for a while, and I had always taken pictures. My grandfather, I think I was 9, maybe a little younger, he bought me my first 35 millimeter that was mine camera. And I would take pictures at all of our family gatherings and stuff. And there was always a lot of cut off heads and just completely nothing in focus. But I wonder where all that stuff is. That'd be fun to pull out now.
Right.
But anyway, I think I was 9 when I got that little camera. Anyway, and when we moved to Houston, I ended up working for a retail photography studio. It was a great crash course in getting things right the first time, or just back to back practice. And I was promoted quickly within the company, and one of the people that worked at corporate kind of pulled me aside one day, and he did his own photography on the side, and he wanted me to go work for him, and kind of became like a mentor of sorts. And eventually I left when I got pregnant with my son, who is now 16. I left the studio and pursued things on my own. And I also met a very dear friend named Rachel. She and I worked together at the studio, and we left together, and we started our own business called Girls with Pearls Photography. And at the time, this was 2005. At the time, we were the only female duo. It was still a really male-dominated industry. So we got really big, really fast. And before we even realized or knew how to brand ourselves, we were branding, being very, we always wore little, we wore pearls with everything, but like little Tiffany's inspired, our breakfast at Tiffany's, high neck dresses, little tea links and pearls and heels. But that was fun, especially starting a business that young and inexperienced. You're not scared to do anything, and you don't even think about the risks. You just jump. And so that was fun. And we traveled a lot with Girls with Pearls. We still do stuff now, but we're very selective. Just a wedding is a lot of work. It's very tiring. But after a while, you just, I don't know, as we got older, we started being more choosy on the types of jobs we would take. We didn't want it's hard as you get older and you've experienced things and you've seen so much, and then people are throwing fits over the wrong shade of orange for something, so it just got kind of I guess we were just burnt out, but we traveled a lot. We did a lot of weddings in Brooklyn. Those were always so beautiful, and it's a different feeling there. But I did that for, I still shoot with Rachel. It's just like once a year now.
Okay.
And we just take like special projects. We mostly just do our own thing. But in 2012, my family and I moved here to Tulsa. And, I was never really involved in my community. Houston's so big as well, though. It's really easy to get lost. But things like culture and other races and stuff, you didn't have to seek it. It just slapped you in the face all the time. It was just there. And then when I moved to Tulsa, I started noticing that I never heard any other languages spoken. I hardly ever saw people that didn't look like me. And then I just started noticing, I really don't know how to explain it in words, but it's just a different feeling being a woman in that environment, or in an artist environment, but then also I was trying to move into something a little more monotonous, a little more steady. So I jumped into the corporate world, and I could never quite put my finger on it, but it was just different. And it was kind of like one of those aha moments, the whole racism doesn't exist anymore because it doesn't affect me. But once I started noticing the visual segregation in the city, and the way I've just lived in so many different places, and I just felt like I was treated differently here than I did in all the other places I've lived. And it kind of just awoke this thing inside me. And I decided to just try and just look at, I don't even know how I got started in doing any type of activism. I joined a local photography group, PPA, our local PPA chapter here. This is what it was.
And what does PPA stand?
Professional Photographers of America. But we were INPPA, the Indian Nations Professional Photographers of America. And when I didn't think I could be a member because I wasn't Native. And they're like, oh no, it's just like because of our geographical location. That's what and I was like, okay, but like, do we have a good, like, oh, well, of course, in Tulsa and everywhere, there's a quite a large Native population. I was like, no, like in our group.
Yeah. Right.
No, there were none. They're just called INPP. I think maybe originally when it was first started, perhaps, but I met somebody in that group who at the time she was starting to, this was probably around 2014. She was starting to they were trying to do some major project out at Turkey Mountain, which was going to threaten a lot of the native wildlife out there, and of course the like untouched wilderness that's on in that area. And she got into a big kind of battle, I guess, with these commercial developers, and ended up winning. And it was kind of, I didn't realize how easy it was to be able to get in and, into that activism or activist circle and do what you can to fight for change. And I think I just kind of fell into stuff that way. I started volunteering for the local Tulsa County Democratic Party, and I just started showing up at events and taking pictures. And then, it's a small town, so I say small town. It's in comparison to Houston. Houston. I just started, recognizing people, and we were running. Karen Gaddis was running her first campaign, and there was a picture that they kept putting on all of her literature. And I went one day up to the headquarters, and I was like, this is really terrible. It looks like it was taken with like a cell phone in like 1992. It's so bad. I'm like, well, that's what she gave us. I was like, I'm a photographer. Let me help you. And so I did this amazing shoot for Karen, who she's a middle-aged white lady. She's a little older, maybe 20 years older than me. And I was really proud of it. I thought it turned out really well. And then that just kind of snowballed things. And I just, from there, I'm not sure. What was my question?
What was your childhood like?
Oh, yeah.
Because you know what? It happens. So I'm like, oh, what was your childhood? And then when I interview folks, they go from childhood to like present day. And I'm just like, no, go for it. Because this is like a natural progression story. So
my parents growing up, my mom is the biggest feminist I know, but she will never admit to that. I don't know why. She just thinks it's like a dirty word, I guess. But my parents raised me to be very independent, fiercely independent, and outspoken and strong. And now that I am all of those things, they're like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? But I think I had a really great childhood. I mean, I was the firstborn, and my parents were so young. There was a lot of learning for all of us involved, but I got to do really cool things. I lived in Spain when I was 4, 5, and 6, and things were so. When you move to a new area, there's especially something that's not like in America, I guess, but it was like this in Hawaii. There's a wait list to get into Navy housing. So we lived in off-base housing, or we lived off-base in regular civilian neighborhoods in Spain. And we lived I'm sure it wasn't this big, but I always felt like it was a castle. It was this beautiful white home. I think it was only 1 story, but it had a wall. We had a wall built all the way around, just like that white stucco, very Adobe type style. We had the most beautiful yard and gardens, and it was like our own little paradise. And the owners, I was gonna see if I could remember her name, but I don't. But the owners would come and pick me up, and they would take me to go do things. And we would always go to the beach, and she would teach me Spanish. And she was a little old lady. She's probably in her late 60s. Well, that's not really that old, but she was, I remember her, kind of being hunched, but I was 4, 5, and 6. But, we had a maid and a gardener, and which my dad was just a peon. It was like his first or second duty station. We made like hardly any money. It's just that it was, things were so inexpensive over there. But I got to travel and see some amazing things. We used to go camping at this spot, and it was at the top of like a cliff. And if you walked more to the edge, and then when you walked to the edge and you looked over, it was like looking over this beautiful, picturesque, it's like it wasn't Greece, but that very memorable shot at the top of the hill, and you can see like the homes and then the beautiful blue water. It's clear. That's what it reminds me of. But there were no houses. It was just beautiful nature, and you could see the fish, the bigger ones at least, swimming. And then you had to like trek down zigzag in a little path to get down to the water. Wow. It was so beautiful. But one time we went to Morocco, and I remember it being very hot and dusty, and we were in the markets. We went to the markets, and there were like beautiful giant rugs everywhere, just stacked on top of each other. My dad kept sitting me on top of the rugs while they talked to people or did things. And I remember there was, as Americans, we have no personal space or manners sometimes. But people, we look at things like, oh, this is neat. And then pick it up and put it down, and then be like, oh, this is cool too. Oh yeah, look at the way they made this. There were some other tourists with us in our group, and they kept picking up things. But in Morocco, the vendors thought that we were trying to steal. The man was trying to steal. So the way they punish a thief is they cut off your hand. So the guy grabs the guy's arm and pulls it, and he pulls out like this giant sheik knife, and like all of our people were like, whoa, 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 whoa. And then like we all had to get on the bus and leave.
Oh my gosh. He was ready to do it right then.
He was just ready to just like boom, cut off his arm, because it was crazy.
I've heard about that being done, but I thought it was like a organized thing that they lead you to the city square, right, and do it there, not like a little
mini guillotine.
Yeah, not like right at the vendor space.
No, it was crazy. I mean, I'm surely it's a little different now, but who knows? I remember one time I went on a field trip with my class, and what grade was I in? I think I was in first grade, and we always stopped. There's this place in Spain we used to go to all the time on the weekends, and have like a fancy lunch or something. I don't remember. It was just like a part of town, like Utica Square here, but it was called the Red Square, and it was lined with orange trees. There were orange groves everywhere, and my class, we took a field trip to the Red Square, and we got to go to the markets, and my parents gave me money to be able to buy something, and everybody came home with like these beautiful flamenco dolls or flamenco dolls, and like combs for their hair or things. And I bought a 3-pound sack of olives.
Jamie.
I loved olives.
In first grade?
Yes. Giant sack of olives. I remember walking through this market, and like there was just like a goat brain sitting on wax paper, and I was like, oh, what's that? And they told me what it was, and I was all, I don't want that. No, thank you.
So
it was neat.
You said that your grandfather gave you your first 35 millimeter camera at 9 years old. Were there any indications from you that like, oh, she likes to take photographs, or she's a photographer, that led to him gifting you?
I'm not sure. I know that I had kind of dabbled. I have some vague memories of me messing with a camera before. And I don't even remember what it's called, but they had this like strip of flash cubes that you popped at the top of the camera, and then you had however many, like I think there was 10. But I don't remember actually seeing anything produced for those. However, I will say my mom was notorious for never, ever developing film. So it's very possible that there's a few dozen rolls of film hiding in a random jar somewhere in my mom's house. But I don't think so. I've thought about this before, and I've always wondered if it was something like, you're driving us crazy, here's something to go do that you don't need help with.
Yeah.
Or if it was something my grandpa saw in me, or I don't remember anybody else in my family being particularly artistic. Everybody was just kind of country, doing their own thing. My grandparents were EMS workers, volunteer firefighters, and just kind of like community people. And then on my father's side, those grandparents were, they were wealthier. They they had horses that they would race, and they were kind of involved in that whole world. But they also all got sick and died. So I'm sure it's all the drinking and smoking, I guess, but, all the fun stuff.
Right.
But, I remember though, after he gave me a few rolls of film, and I remember after those actually did get developed, and I remember sitting and looking at them. I don't remember. All I remember is like the cutoff heads and stuff. But I do remember though that was because growing up in a military family, you don't see your family all the time, or like I guess most kids. Yeah. Which as an adult, at the time I didn't like it, but as an adult I look back and that was like the best. Everybody is always on their best behavior when you only get to see them once or twice a year, and every moment the most is made of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when you actually move somewhere where family is, you're like, oh, you're not that nice all the time. But my grandpa and I used to call him Peepaw. Peepaw and I, that was when we had we developed like this really strong bond. That year when he gave me that camera and at the family reunion, and he was like my favorite. And then I don't think I did too. No. Okay. So when I worked for the paper in college, I was in a photojournalism class, and I had to buy my own camera for that. And part of my class, I would have projects I had to complete. And I remember always being like worried or embarrassed to show my stuff. And I remember I purposefully turned something in late once because we had to get everything done on slides, and then my professor would project them. You would hand him your slides, and then he would read off whatever little blip you gave him, and then everybody would kind of critique it, or you'd have to write stuff about it. Sometimes things would be said out loud, but I remember I couldn't. I was too scared, and I turned my stuff in late so I could sit through and listen, and I thought everything that came up was complete shit.
Wow.
And then I was like, why was I so scared to turn my stuff in? It was like and of course, when I turn it in late, nobody else gets to review it but my professor. So nobody got to see, what I did for that project. And then I do remember, falling into that, like, I'm so artistic realm. And like, I remember one time I was I was with a friend, and there was a dead palm tree, and in the distance, and it was like up. It just went up maybe about as tall as a stool, so 2-3 feet up, and then it was like almost like a right angle, and it hadn't quite fallen yet. And I was like, that is so interesting. I need to go get my camera. And she's all, it's a dead tree. I was like, yes, you're right. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Bring me back.
Thanks. But I think that living all over the world and being exposed to different religions and people and cultures and just living situations, I think that it helps just kind of mold me into whatever I am now.
Yeah.
Once we moved to Tulsa and I started trying to get more involved in community events and activism and such, I started finding a love for like true photojournalism, which I already did in my weddings that I shot, but there's not any fluff to it. Like this image here, like if I was to shoot, I would try to set up for, make sure there's lighting. And I mean, granted, this particular one, it's my favorite one from that series that I did, but those boys just happen to be perfectly posed. And the light just happened to be hitting them the perfect way. And you could see the drips of sweat. And I didn't really do anything to that besides make it black and white. And kind of bump the contrast a little to bring out certain things. But in a wedding, everything has to be so perfect and pretty. And if it's raw or like it's real life, but it's like an Instagram life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't like to do a whole bunch of stuff to my pictures. I like to keep them as natural as possible. And when, let me see. So when I shot this, when I was doing that work, this was 2021. So in 2020, George Floyd was murdered. Terrence Crutcher was murdered. That happened. And actually, you know what? That Terrence Crutcher dying was probably I was already off on this, just angry all the time. I worked for an insurance company. We're a brokerage firm, and I was inputting data, which that was probably like the absolute opposite of what I should have been doing in life. I don't do data.
Yeah.
Not in this sense, just monotonous inputting data all day. And I couldn't understand why nobody was just up in arms and just pissed and just flipping tables. And I was so mad. And I had in my company, let's see, there were only 2 people of color out of like 60. One black guy downstairs, he was the head of IT, and he handled everything. And then my friend at work, she's black, and I remember being so like mad at her and frustrated, like, why? And why aren't you more mad? And I remember I wrote, this was around the time when Beyonce did the Super Bowl halftime thing.
Yeah.
And she was like, I can't believe she's parading around in that outfit and saying Negro. And I was like, what? No, like she's literally covering everything that people get mad about.
Yeah.
Like just because she has a beautiful body, but she's also she's taking the power from that word. And, but that was like a big learning curve for me, having this friendship with Mary. Just as somebody who, there was many things. I don't know if I'm getting too far off topic here, but just with Mary growing up here, living here her entire life, she was a very, I don't remember the last time we spoke, but just kind of quiet, meek, she did her job, kept her head down, great worker, flew below the radar on everything. Me, I was just like, oh, you're just, quirky, nerdy girl. But as, looking back, she was doing what she had to do. Can't be, especially in a building where you're one of two people of color in the entire building. But I didn't have any other friends here yet besides my family that lived here, which is my husband's family. And I wanted to go to Terrence Crutcher's service, and I didn't know how to go. I just knew from the news where it was at. So I just parked across the street and held up a sign that said, "I'm sorry." And when the processional went through, I just got out of my car and I stood on the side of the car in between the door and the hood and just kind of braced myself. And I remember it's such a shit. It's just so everything's shit. That was just kind of the beginning, I think, for myself, just that desire to constantly, I don't want to say it as I'm trying to insert myself into history, but just after seeing how many people did nothing or had no, what's the word? They might have had feelings, or they might have wanted to do something, but didn't know where to go, didn't know what to do, and didn't feel safe expressing it. It kind of gave me this this desire to always be there. Just no matter what happens, this needs to be documented in some manner, and this needs to be untouched. It may not be important now, but it might be. It might could help somebody somewhere down the road. But it's almost like, as a community here in Tulsa, things were, it was almost, I just don't, maybe it's because I wasn't in the right circles yet, but things just weren't talked about openly. And I just thought that maybe if I could figure out a way to get whatever's happening here out into the world, that it might make other people feel more comfortable to do it, but also at the same time make sure that if shit does go down, if things do happen here again, what really happened is out there, not letting somebody else control the narrative for their own betterment, So when Pete Souza, he was Obama's photographer, and I just love, well, who doesn't love, well, I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't love Obama, but I was obsessed, and but especially with all the photography that Mr. Souza did, because it was so, you could feel the weight that he had on his shoulders. There's several images of him just kind of just pondering, almost looking out the window at the Oval Office, and there's just the natural light coming in, hitting him here, and then you have the darker shadows behind him, and you could see the emptiness of the room, but also the vastness. And you could just, I just love the way Pete was able to just completely encapsulate everything. And he, after after Obama left office. I loved also the way Pete turned into this amazing activist. If you haven't ever, you should go look him up on Twitter. He's hilarious, and I like when especially when the previous administration was in office, and people would make a big deal, like there was something about a baby, holding a baby, I think.
Yeah.
And then he's like, ah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Obama's got like a set of triplets, and they're like, oh, it's like so natural, and the babies are just like, oh, you're perfect. Anyway, but Pete Souza was a big inspiration to me as far as taking what I learned as a wedding photographer, just anticipating movement, finding that light, and taking in, like, at a wedding you spend so much money on little things like placemats and the baubles that go on the tables, or tiny little charms that you might wrap up in your bouquet, or there's so many sentimental things. So being able to get as much of that into an image, and especially in key moments like the first kiss or the first dance or father-daughter dance. Father-daughter dance is over, the bride and groom, or the bride and her dad are over here. Then you have the mom in the foreground, wiping away a tear, wearing grandma's ring and great grandma's hanky, little things like that. I feel like that, being able to pull from my background, and that helps me kind of bring a little bit of a softer touch to shitty things that I have to take pictures of sometimes. I know I keep saying that word. Is that okay?
Yeah, people have said way worse.
Okay.
And it's authentic. So.
Well, I just didn't want to have to constantly bleep me. But, sometimes, we find ourselves just in crappy situations that are still important and need to be. But I feel like sometimes I'm able to take something as simple as, this particular project was for Society's Cage, and just, it's an amazing piece of art for its vastness, what it represents, how it came to be. But if you don't know any of that, it's just a rusty metal cage. And spending so much time, intimate time, I feel like, because it was here for 6 weeks, and I was inside that thing when it was 104 outside to when it was cold and raining and miserable. And it made it, I feel like I was able to capture it in so many different lights. Like it was, it's like it showed different sides to where it can be soft and forgiving when it needed to. When it was hot, it's almost like the rusted edges on the poles would curl, make it, it was more harsh. And
so can you talk to us about like what it was like shooting Society's Cage, and kind of just thinking about how your photography's come more full circle? Because you talked about, like, in Houston it's so big, so getting involved in your community didn't look the same as getting involved here in the Tulsa community, which is significantly smaller, I would imagine, than Houston. And then documenting this art installation called Society's Cage, and then what it was like to document that and then to see that work in the Jewish Federation Museum.
Yeah, so when being a part of the nonprofit that brought Society's Cage to town, it's called Tri-City Collective, and the two founders of Tri-City worked closely with the architects that designed and built the cage. They were here working on a project at Gilcrease, I believe, Smith Group, the architects from Smith Group. And our two founders just kind of hit it off with the guys, and we're like, yeah, let's just bring it down here we were getting ready. The Black Wall Street Massacre Centennial was last year, and it was just kind of perfect timing to have something as grand as Society's Cage come down. And being on the back end of that and knowing all the logistics that went into bringing the cage down here, which is a 10-foot by 10-foot steel cage, and I think we needed it was $40,000 just to drive it here, and then so that money had to be raised like that, and that's where the Jewish Federation came in. One of the founders of Tri-City is Jewish, and he reached out to his community and explained the significance of, these 4 brilliant men at Smith Group came together, and after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. After they were murdered, the whole country was finally reacting together and appropriately. So, and they came together and they took they took 200 plus years of racism and broke it down into words and sayings and slurs and turned that into an equation. And then they took that equation and plotted it out, and just to kind of see what it would become, and it became the cage. And to even conceptualize something like that that's so beyond my scope of understanding of anything.
I agree.
It's brilliant on multiple levels, and then you think, okay, it's a metal box with some bars, but then they went in and, once you're inside the cage, well, first of all, getting it set up was no easy feat. We had to, because the architects are, artists in their own right, and then our founders of Tri-City are also creators, artists in their sense as well. Nobody really thought about the whole logistics of it, and we needed permit after permit. We needed cranes. We needed city streets blocked off to bring this giant piece in, and it all worked out and it all came together. But getting to that point, it was just such a feat. And with my background in documenting weddings and such, and doing photojournalism for, at the time I was also working with a candidate. I was running a congressional campaign, and I'll get to that in a second. But I knew the weight. I knew what it meant to bring something like that to Tulsa. I had been here I moved here in 2012, and this was 2020. So, not much comes here. We're a big little town, but not. We're still we're still pretty small in the grand scheme of our country, and so for something that big to come here, and knowing all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into getting it here, I wanted to make sure it was documented in a way to kind of preserve that, whether it just be for ourselves, like within Tri-City, or not even thinking it would ever be on display somewhere. But I was there at the end, it was being displayed at Vernon AME Church in Greenwood. And I was there when the trucks first started arriving. And I was there for a few hours that day. And that's when we started running into permit problems. We had to rush back to an office to start making phone calls. And at this point, I had already been working with local government people. I'd help them get into office by working on their campaigns. And so I'd made some friends, and I just placed a phone call to just about everybody I knew that could have some kind of influence somewhere to help us, or at the very least just guide us, because we also had no idea where to go, what to do, what was needed. And but when we finally got the permits we needed and the time frame that allowed us to be on site after hours, we couldn't even get started till like, I think 3 a.m., 2 a.m. or something. And we had some crazy storm with our crazy weather here blow through. There were tornadoes and hail, and it all of a sudden was freezing outside. And it was just, it was a hot mess. But I wanted to make sure it was just properly documented, in my mind, properly documented. Just, getting these giant heavy pieces of steel off the truck to the crane lifting it up, and then all of a sudden the wind picking up and it's like spinning the platform. And then you have, this thing's so giant. You have these, you have this giant piece of steel, and then there's two men. There's the crane holding it up, and then there's two men. It's like they have a kite, and it's just one rope line, and they're just trying to kind of guide it to where it needs to be. And
wow.
It was intense. And we had to rent crazy lights because there's no lighting over there, which that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But getting all the little moments, like our two founders sitting in a chair, like trying to stay awake, and they have their double fisting Red Bulls and going over notes and things. And I'm behind them, and I have on my wide angle lens, and I can get pretty far from off the sides of them, but you can see the crane and the platforms hanging in the air in the distance, and then Bracken and Q just sitting there like, oh my God, I'm so tired. But it's finally happening. It's finally coming together. So from getting that to when we finally got the base of everything done, and we had to call in just any available body to come out and help us place all these poles everywhere. One of my other favorite pictures of putting this together, we had a little service line. You pick up one item and you pass it to the next person, going from the back of a truck up a ladder up to the top of the roof, where you had to place these poles down in all the little holes. And then we had to hire an electrician, and then we had to run wires. And it was quite a community effort. People that we, as our nonprofit, had never worked with before or even met, some of them, just at a moment's notice, just coming out and helping kind of bring this giant project together. And with the importance of what it represented on that holy land, I was really happy to see that it was just as important to complete strangers to get this done and completed as it was to me to be there to document it and to see it and to help bring it out. And then afterwards, everything was all said and done. Tri-City sent out a thank you card, and we had sent out some little mounted images of, I literally have, like 6,000 dang pictures from the 6 weeks that we had this exhibit, because we would hold, there was like, this is the Dream Center kids. They came out and did a tour, and then there was a book reading there. We had a poetry night. We had community activists come out and kind of talk about like what to do next. What can we do to help? How do we get out of this shithole that our country's in, our city's in? This is just after our Tulsa mayor, G.T. Bynum, had, when G.T. Bynum was elected, it was just kind of, don't go there.
No,
Go
yes,
there. Okay.
I'm shaking my head at like him.
When he was first elected, he seemed to be very open and willing to work with all communities and to do what's right. Like, he might be pissing off people in his party or on his side, but in the end, he appeared to be willing to do the right thing. But then, it wasn't even like a gradual change into this completely different person. It was just I'm done playing that game. And that was disappointing. But anyway, to see everybody come together and make this happen was a big deal. And then when we mailed all the pictures out to the different donors, one donor in particular who happened to be, her family had a wing at the Sherman Miller Museum of Jewish Art that her family, I guess, had built previous generations or paid for at least. She reached out and wanted to do an exhibit, which was shocking because I'd never even considered that. I've never had an exhibit before. I'd never done anything like that. I just document things for really, I guess, just to put on my drive or keep on my server. But we use them for different things here and there. But to see, I was so pleased because I know the impact that being a part of this project made on me personally, and being able to take that and put it out there. Because it took days to put together and thousands of dollars to get it here. It's not like it's something that can just happen once a year or even every 5 years maybe. It was quite an ordeal, and so to be able to preserve that and have that impact other people, specifically children, who might not have that kind of exposure at home. And especially now, with the way things are going, with all the legislation against teaching our real history, it may not ever come. But our great friends at the Jewish Federation have found an amazing way to incorporate the terrible plight of our history, but attaching it to the Holocaust, because the Holocaust is allowed to be taught in schools. So drawing similarities from our history of racism and slavery and oppression to the history of the Holocaust and the Jewish people, it's like our loophole, I guess you could say. Yeah. But it was only supposed to be on display for like a month and a half, and it ended up being up for 6 months, which was really, it just came down just a few weeks ago, and it went up like January 18th or something. I don't know. It was really neat for me to be able to experience that and to be able to share that. And then from there, we just kind of, I started my own side project documenting activism in our state, how it looks now. We haven't really had a big movement, as far as I know, because I didn't grow up here. But we haven't really had much of a activism or political movement to this grandeur, like in many decades, from just talking to people who have been doing this for such a long time here, and documenting that and the changes. Like, one of my favorite images I've taken was this was in the summer of 2020. This was Juneteenth weekend when President Trump came to town, and there was that was such a busy time for me. I was running a campaign, and I was part of a team that put together a rally in Poto, and was not welcomed whatsoever because it was the stigma of Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all of that in the news, and from people that didn't agree with that, the All Lives Matter crew. There was talks of blowing up the courthouse to keep us out. There were snipers on the rooftops. We did an event in Grove, and there were literal snipers up on the roofs because there were so many threats made. And it was a bunch of college kids that some weren't even in college yet, that organized it. And it was so well done. It was a really great event. But anyway, back to Poto. Our loophole was to make this about a rally of thanks to, they started, the woman that really spearheaded this, her name's Kaylin Free. She's a former DA for whatever county that is down there. And she found her loophole. She started an LLC called the Loving Neighbors of Eastern Oklahoma, and did the walk through there as a thank you to Dr. Montgomery and his family. And Dr. Montgomery is the gentleman that's responsible for integrating the first school in Oklahoma. And he has a very interesting, rich history. But he was a veterinarian and was in the service. And like when he got out of the service, he and his wife were traveling in a train. I think they were in Galveston area coming up here. And like they weren't even allowed to buy food because that was during Jim Crow, and they were denied services. And like when they ended up in Poto and they were warned not to stay, people kept telling them they had a hard time finding a place to sleep when they first got to town. And people told them, you're not welcome here. You're not wanted. Stay tonight, get your rest, but then you've got to go. It's not safe for you. And he was like, well, I don't know. There's like 45,000 head of cattle here and only about 200 people. So I think I'll take my odds because there's no other vet within a certain distance. And I didn't get to, of course, ever meet Dr. Montgomery himself, but he raised some amazing children, and I got to interview his children. But anyway, his children and their children led this march, and we're going down Poto, and just picture this very, very Americana little tiny town. It's dusty, a bunch of closed stores, haven't been practically a ghost town. And then, there's a couple of businesses that were in the main strip that were still open. But mostly, everybody goes to the bigger cities for things now. Right when you turn onto Main Street in Poto, there's this wrought iron arch that goes across the street and says, "Welcome to Poto." And I have this, the grandson of Dr. Montgomery is directly underneath the "Welcome to Poto." And that's kind of in the background. You can see it clearly. And he's screaming into a bullhorn, and his babies and his mom and then close to 200, I guess, community people behind him, all with their Black Lives, I'm getting chills, Black Lives Matter signs. And it's just it was, to me, like, that's just something that you didn't see in Poto. You just didn't see that. There were some disgusting people that showed up, but it didn't matter because it was just a really neat time to come together. It was I don't know. So I am a rambling fool, and I apologize. But
no, I mean, you're just I just don't have to ask you these questions now.
Well, documenting all these different things, it's just kind of seeing the progression of the activism in our state, and where I feel art plays a really big role in that, for, documenting it for history's sake, but also just we keep having to get creative in how things are put out in the public. So just something as simple as, a march, for a Black Lives Matter march, we had to start an LLC and and go around and there was a great dedication to Dr. Montgomery coming in the future regardless, but that was a perfect moment in time to be able to do that. And it happened because none of his family lives in Oklahoma anymore. We had to bring them all in. And just to be able to, I could never put myself in their shoes, but to see what, like, the full circle of what that little town has become, or for that family in particular, is just really, really cool. His daughter, Mildred Randolph, whom I interviewed, she has a PhD. She works at University of Kentucky, I want to say, or she did. I think she's in Tennessee now. But she had 2 sons, and one of her sons ended up becoming, you'll have to look him up, Who is Gatsby or something, or he started this crazy documentary where he went to Hollywood and just kind of pretended he was some amazing famous person and had all of these doors open for him. And it's such a neat thing. You have to look him up, like, on Instagram. There's a whole documentary series out about it. And but just to see how something is, it wasn't a simple feat, but something as their grandfather implementing, standing his ground, saying, you know what, I know that I can bring good to this community. I know that your people are going to need help.
Right.
And helping turn that corner of Oklahoma into a more diverse area, and making people that looked like him feel more safe. Mildred, I remember her saying, she's like, now this can't, I don't want this part on the radio, but it's not like Poto was really nice to us for a while. She's like, it was still only me and like maybe 3 other people that weren't white in my class, like from kindergarten to senior year. She's like, but we were still the first, and we made the best of it. She's like, her dad just didn't want, her dad wanted his kids to grow up different. He had to grow up separated from everything, and he didn't want that for his kids. And so.
Well, I think along the lines of you saying you want to document this, I think it's important because often Oklahoma isn't thought of as a place where activism is taking place. Yeah. We're a deeply conservative, deeply red state. And so I don't think people necessarily look at Oklahoma, certainly not Poto, Oklahoma, but just Oklahoma in general, and say, oh, there's activism taking place there, or there's radical acts taking place there. And I think even just going back to the civil rights movement and just seeing how instrumental Oklahoma was in the larger civil movement that swept through the South, I think what you're doing is completely on brand with the fact that, like, we have to show people that, like, Oklahoma is doing their part too, and here's the representation of that. And so I think that's definitely important that we start documenting those things, and preserving that part of history. Because otherwise, I think there's a narrative about Oklahoma that would continue to be spread,
Right.
And without this representation visually, there's nothing to kind of counter that.
Like, and the counter argument is always louder. That's what's that's what's heard, and they're controlling the narrative. And then this is, like you said, this is just a way to say, no, we're not. We're here. And I will say that when I first started doing protests and such here, even here in Tulsa, there was maybe 50 people sometimes. And now, the other day, there was, after Roe was turned over, that same day, there was a march down. Well, now it's not even it doesn't even feel real, because you have to stay on the sidewalks and you have to have a permit. And it's like, okay, they're controlling how we do everything, but whatever. But I mean, there was, I would say, around 500 people there, which is, still rather small in compared to other cities, but 500 people in Tulsa, that's a decent percentage,
Yeah.
But it's growing, and I will say also, in Poto, there were little old ladies that showed up and well, I can't march, I can't do this, I can't walk by myself, but I brought snacks. Oh. And it's I brought markers and stuff to help. And I made my grandkids, we sat down and we made signs. So if anybody forgot their sign, and it was just, or they set up voter registration booths. They set a little table, and that's all they could do. But they wanted to do something. And so, but I think it's also, it's not just one type of person. It's not just, a bunch of young kids. It's not a bunch of old hippies or middle-aged white ladies like me. It's just, it's all over. You have, the other day, I don't realize how much my son, I hope that he is going to be a wonderful human. And as a parent, it's really hard not to micromanage or helicopter parent, but I feel like I try my best to do what I can to make sure he is just a happy, first and foremost, and a good human. And the other day I had to take him to school to do an exam, because he takes summer courses, and we drove by an early childhood development center outside of his high school. And I was like, you know what that is? He's like, we also have a dark sense of humor. He goes to an abortion clinic. I was all, and Jinx, you kidding? And he's like, I'm kidding. No, what is it? I was like, it's a daycare for high school students. They're going to be building more and more of those all around the state with this craziness going on. And then it got kind of quiet, and I was like, bud, if you find yourself in this situation, don't ever think that you can't come to me for help, no matter what y'all's decision would be. And he looked at me really quick, and I was like, what? And he goes, it's not my decision. I was like, oh, dang. Okay. I was like, wow. And he goes, but it's not. I was like, I know. It surprised me. I didn't expect that. But working with these younger kids, and this next generation, in 2020, all those fresh out of high school up to first year in college kids they were organizing things all over the state. They're not going to put up with this. As they get older and they start making money and they are embedding themselves into community and corporations, I hope I'm not being naive and thinking this way, but I really don't think that this bigotry and hatred and stuff will stay around. So hopefully images that these things that I capture will just be like, wow, look how crappy it used to be. Look how terrible it was.
Right.
And so anyway, they are louder, but at least with art like mine and other local artists here putting stuff out there, it allows people to draw their own opinion, their own interpretation, but also you can't deny what you're looking at. It's not like you can misread somebody's tone or misunderstand something. It's a man wearing a white pride t-shirt and swastikas tattooed down his arm, screaming in a young Black girl's face. There's no way to misinterpret that. It doesn't matter what she did, if she did anything. That's not a good human. So.
Well, I think just to finish off, can you tell us about your most recent project or what you're working on now?
Yeah. So last year in 2021, every year there is a rodeo in Owasso on Juneteenth. They call it the Black Rodeo, Juneteenth Rodeo, and I had never been, and I had just gotten a new camera. And I didn't really care to take any pictures that night. I just had it with me just in case. And I went, and I've done a lot of really cool things in my life. And it's one of the top 10 best nights of my life. It wasn't even anything, it had nothing to do with me. It was just the experience. And it was so loud and fun, and nothing was expected. Everything was a complete surprise and so action-packed. I grew up in South Texas for a good portion of my life, and I went to an ag school. That's something rodeos and things like that I've always been around, but this was nothing compared to that. It was just so exciting, and to see a different spin on rodeo culture was just really exciting. But I brought my camera. I had no intention of taking any pictures, and then I just couldn't stop taking pictures. And I still haven't finished editing everything because there's so many. But taking all those images and then just kind of sharing them with people I love has turned them into one. There's going to be a children's book made, 2 books. One is a book of poetry and one is a children's book on Black cowboys, Black rodeos. And then I partnered with Quraysh Ali Lansana, and I don't remember if there's anybody else involved in this, but we have been in discussion with the Cowboy History Museum or something like that.
The Western History Museum?
Maybe that's it.
Oklahoma
City.
Okay,
Yes.
Yeah.
And doing an exhibit on Black rodeos and that culture, and that just how it's a complete contrast. It's not, sometimes when you watch, or if you ever watched a Western movie,
Mm-hmm.
everything's just kind of slow and it's exciting for a hot second, and then it's over. But this is just it's nonstop, heart pounding excitement for 6 hours. There's so much going on, and you have the food's different. It's a much more inviting family atmosphere than I feel like the rodeos that I grew up in. There was areas that you're not supposed to go in, and everything was really expensive. I remember even 20, 30 years ago. But at this Owasso rodeo, there was a rodeo in Owasso. It was so just anybody could go anywhere really. And they encouraged the kids to run out in the middle of the arena in between, sets when it was safe. But you didn't see things like that. Everything, you had to protect the sanctity of whatever. But, they had moonshine vendors, which I'm not sure if that was exactly legal, but it was delicious. Anyway, I'm very excited for this project because it's a completely untapped, this is something I think that I didn't even know there was such thing as a specific Black rodeo. I mean, I've known Black cowboys growing up, but I didn't know that they had their own dedicated space, which I'm glad. I feel like is important because it's easy to get lost elsewhere. But I think this is going to be a really cool project to be able to put out there for other kids that look like them, that are interested in riding horses and roping. And my favorite event is called the Pony Express, and it's basically a relay race with a baton like you would use in a regular relay race, but on horseback. And it's such a high speed, and the horses are flipping and the guys fly off the horse. Like, it's so intense.
Wow.
It's like kind of like a car wreck. Like, you can't look away.
Yeah.
But it's so exciting. And I just think that for, these cute kids running around out there that maybe want to be a part of this kind of world, that I want to be able to preserve that and show them that it's there if they want it. And also, there is no representation of that at all in the Western History Museum here in Oklahoma. This summer, I get to go in next month. I'm touring there's an actual Black Cowboy Museum in the Richmond-Rosenberg area outside of Houston. I'm excited to go see that and kind of get an idea of how they have all of that set up and such. But anyway, I'm very excited about this. We have the 2 books coming up, and then this exhibit, and we already have a couple of backers for the exhibit here. And then my Society's Cage stuff, I didn't even talk about this, and I'll try to go real quick, but it's being turned into a curriculum. And then one of the main donors for funding for the cage she wants to turn it into a traveling exhibit, to take it to other places, but specifically schools, because again, tying it into the Holocaust allows that history to be taught. So I'm very excited about. Who doesn't want to have their stamp in history in some manner? But I'm just very excited to be like the Pete Souza of Oklahoma, in a sense. Just I know how much I enjoyed his work and found comfort in his pictures, and felt like there'd never be a time I'd have a conversation or be in the same room with President Obama, but being able to have work that makes even an inkling of impact that Mr. Souza put out to Oklahoma, it's pretty exciting. I'm excited to see where that goes.
I'm excited too. I think that museum or that exhibit is going to be really amazing. It's super timely. Yeah, and
it's a pretty cool museum too. During the pandemic, when everything was shut down, I think it was one of the security guards there, he took over their social media and just started kind of having fun with like the wax figures there, and just kind of, he would interview like a stuffed roadrunner that was on display.
Yeah.
But he kind of gave the museum a voice. Before, it was just like, we have this exhibit coming up from this day to this date. We're featuring this artist, but now they have like a sense of humor, and they have an actual voice and tone. Yeah. And so I'm excited to take that, and then to have this whole other area of the Western, type culture introduced, and to see what they can come up with for that. So
yeah. Well, big things on the horizon, but thank you for taking the time out to talk to me today, and good luck with all of your future endeavors.
Thanks. Thank you.
Happy to say that I will be involved in them.
Yes.
But, I'm excited.
Me too. Thank you so much, Adam.